Dear viewers and followers, welcome back to the training lessons for the Ameen Accounting and Warehouse software. The title of this lesson is Managing and Setting Up Invoice Forms. As we learned in the previous lesson how to add invoices from the invoice menu and then purchases or sales. And we noticed how it automatically posted to the warehouses, and how it automatically posted to the accounts. In this lesson we will learn how to customize the properties of these forms, and prepare it in accordance with the company's needs and financial policies. If we go to the Tools menu and then Manage, we will notice the option of Forms Management. By clicking on Invoices, then Edit, the Bills Forms window will appear, through which invoice patterns will be prepared and customized, where we can add new forms, or modify the default forms that were created when creating the company file. Like purchases, sales, purchase returns and sales returns. We will notice that there are some options that are activated by default when creating the company file according to each form. These options are divided into several sections. First, the invoice type. You will notice that there are 6 default options, which are purchases, sales, purchase returns, and sales returns. Also input and output. If you select any of these options, you will notice that some of the default options have changed. The second section is Default Accounts. Here the accounts to which the invoice will be posted will be allocated. Of course, the option to generate entry for this form has been activated. For example, the default account for materials in a purchase invoice is purchases, and the default account for discounts is the purchase discount. If we go to the sales invoice form, you will notice that the default account for materials is the revenue account, which here is sales, and the discount account is sales discount. As for the default values section, this section can be used to set some default values. For example, the default invoice price, where the default price for this form can be determined, so that the price of the items is determined automatically when entering the invoice. For example, in a purchase invoice, you can select the last purchase price. You can also specify the default store. The default currency can be specified if there are multiple currencies in the created file. The other section is also the table fields. You will notice that there are some fields that are automatically enabled. You can also add some additional fields such as the warehouse, discounts, whether it is a value or a percentage, expiration date, notes, and other additional fields. We come to the most important section, which is the bill properties. You will notice there are many features. First, you will notice the generated entry. You will notice by default the existing forms option is enabled to generate entry automatically. Therefore, the accounting entry will be generated automatically when adding an invoice. If this option is cancelled, this means that the accounting entry will not be generated automatically when adding an invoice. Therefore, the data entry person or the authorized person, after adding the invoice, must generate this accounting entry manually. You will also notice there is an option, which is auto posting to accounts. If it is cancelled, the data entry person or authorized person must manually post the resulting accounting entry. As for the affecting on profits, what is meant is the reports of invoice profits or item profits, not the final financial reports. These options can be enabled in sales or sales return forms. As for the effects on prices, these options can be activated if we want, after adding an invoice for this form, to affect the prices of items, as last purchase price or cost. As for posting bill, you will also notice that by default the option Auto Post to Warehouse is enabled. When this option is removed, it means that when the invoice is added, the program will not post directly to the warehouse. Then the data entry person or the authorized person must check the invoice, and then post it to the warehouses manually. However, if the option of docented post to warehouses is activated, this means that the stock quantities will not be affected when adding an invoice of this type. There are also some default options that can be enabled within the invoice properties. One of the very important options is the option to use payment terms. This option can be activated if we want to specify the due date of the invoice when it is credit. You can also specify the group of items that belong to this form. You can also specify the customer or supplier account for this form. We will now give some practical examples of these options. For example, on a sales invoice. We will assign, for example, a store as a default store. We will set the default price, which is the consumer price, for example. We will save the changes. If we go to enter the sales invoice, we will notice that the default warehouse has been specified first. Of course, you can change this store. You will notice when you choose any item, the consumer price that was specified in the item card will appear automatically. Back to Forms Management again. Specifically Sales Invoice Form. We will now cancel the option to generate entry automatically. Then we will add an invoice to see the effect of this option. Here we notice that after saving the invoice, the entry was not generated automatically. While pressing the Operations button, we notice that the option of Generate Entry has been activated. From here, the entry can be generated manually by the data entry person or the person authorized for this process. The program will now generate the accounting entry for this invoice. Now back to the other options. We will now disable the option Auto Posting to Accounts. Also, we will add a new invoice again. Notice now, after saving the invoice, that the accounting entry has been generated. While if we open this entry, we will notice the activation of the option, which is Post. This indicates that this entry has not been posted to the accounts. The data entry person or the authorized person must check the invoice and the accounting entry, and then press the Post button. Also, back to the options in the sales invoice form. We will remove the option Auto Post to Warehouses. We will also add a new sales invoice. we will notice that the accounting entry has been generated. When we click on the Operations button, we will notice that a new option has been activated, which is Post Bill, which indicates that this invoice was not automatically posted to the warehouses. The data entry person or the authorized person must post it to the warehouses manually. Going back to the invoice properties again, we will now activate the option to use payment terms. If we go to add a new sales invoice, and the payment method was credit, you will notice that there is a button, which is Payment Terms. While if the bill is a cash payment method, this button will not appear. When you click on the Payment Terms button, you will notice that there are several options for payment terms. And for her, the bill is due in a number of days. This is within the payment terms, due at the end of the month, or due at the end of one of the following months. It should also be noted that payment terms can be customized for each client. If we right-click on the customer's name, then Customer Card, we went to the accounts, we will also notice that there is an option button which is the Payment Terms, where payment terms can be customized for each customer individually, by the authorized person. Note that when selecting a client, the payment terms will appear automatically according to what has been specified. These options can be modified and activated in accordance with the financial statements according to the company's policy. For example, it is possible to switch between the periodic inventory method and the perpetual inventory method. When you activate the option, you will be asked to choose the cost of sales account and the inventory account. These are the most important options within the form management, in addition to other options. Finally, I hope you like this video and share it with your friends so that everyone can benefit.